From one-on-one training to subscription revenue for accountants. I want to preface this whole thing by sharing a little story with you, which is, many years ago when I had first heard about value pricing, I was like, what is this value pricing thing? It doesn't make sense, right? This is terrible. And in order to prove my point, I set out and recorded a video, pulled up a spreadsheet, and talked about a one-on-one training model, which is primarily what I was doing at the time. Is most of my revenue at that time was based on offering QuickBooks trainings, logging in with people, having them share their screen. And I couldn't see any way to sell it other than hourly, right? You pay for an hour, I train you for an hour, and I send you a recording and we're done, right? And so I made this whole video sketching out on a spreadsheet saying, well, even if I tried to charge a flat rate and made it like unlimited in terms of how many sessions people could have, I could lose my shirt because somebody's going to come in there and want 1 million sessions. And I went to great lengths to try and prove my point that value pricing doesn't work for a model like that, at least. And it's funny, at the time I didn't know who Ron Baker was very well. Now I've come to know and respect him very much. In fact, a big part of my holistic accountant program is based and rooted in what I learned from a very long and thorough study of his book, Time's Up, the subscription model for professional services. And anyway, he came and made a comment on my blog post in so many words telling me to put the spreadsheet down, and then he gave me some things to consider about how to make a subscription model work for something like this. Still couldn't wrap my head around it at the time. The best I could do, which is what I still see a lot of people doing, which is what I'm hoping to help solve for today, is I kind of wrapped up hourly in packages that sort of made it look like value pricing, but it was really just hourly disguised inside of a flat rate. In other words, it would be like if you wanted 1 hour, it's $250. If you want 5 hours, you'll save a little money per hour, but you're still getting a set number of hours for dollars. And frankly, I'm still trading my hours for dollars, right? So it's an hourly model, just kind of packaged a little more nicely, let's call it, right? And so the myth of the hourly expert is as follows. When you sell time, you're teaching clients that your value is expressed in terms of minutes, right? And it's backwards. The real value is not in how fast you can click through a QuickBooks Online company file or even show somebody else how to do that. It's the clarity you can bring. It's the way you can make decisions faster. In a training model, it's how you can help people get unstuck where they're stuck, unlock. This is what I loved about one-on-one training, is that while I would be helping somebody, I could practically literally see the light come on in their eyes the minute something clicked and they got it, right? Now, that's where the real value is. It doesn't matter how long it took me to get them there. The value is in the fact that I got them there, right? And that's a big difference in terms of the mindset and why I think so many people struggled, why I struggled for a long time to wrap my head around what it really means to move to, not even value pricing anymore, but a subscription model. And there are significant differences between the two, which I'm happy to engage in a conversation with you. If you'd like to learn more about that, just, jump into the comments section and let me know, ask your questions. But I can promise you that there are big differences between value pricing and the subscription model, right? Bottom line, reducing chaos for people, if not eliminating it, right? And reducing stress. And of course, we always hear people say, oh, well, I'm going to reduce stress for you. So you never want to sell things on that basis because everyone says that, right? But it's still true that that's where the real value is. The most important thing to understand is that there's zero value in the amount of time it took. The real value is in the transformation that you can guide somebody through. And that's kind of a significant part of the foundation of what a true subscription model is all about. Now, another thing that comes up here, which especially when I was doing almost exclusively one-on-one training with people, is how to address the quick question, right? And we all get that. Even if you're just offering accounting services to people, often the way you're getting leads in is you put content out there and they ask questions. And most people are pretty respectful in my experience. They'll ask a few questions and they'll even at some point say, look, I'm happy to pay you for your time. But every once in a while, you'll get that person who will just, every answer you give them begets 3 more questions. And they have no problem, it seems, going back and forth as much as they need to for free without ever offering to pay a dime, right? And so some people feel like they're being taken advantage of, and in some cases it's possible you are, but it doesn't matter. The response to that is to have a process for how to deal with the quick question. And that again is going to bring up this subscription model that I'm talking about here today. And so here's the rule. Processes usually mean rules of engagement. This is how we do things. Here are the limits to what we'll do at a certain level, right? Now we're talking subscription language, right? Here's what I'll do for free. Here's where it starts if you want to pay monthly, right? And here are the other 2 or 3 levels, whatever. And here's where I define exactly what's included at each level. Okay, so my rule for the quick question is that each person gets 3 responses. After that, if they want more help, I'm going to suggest that in order to give them their due attention, and to, in other words, pay the kind of attention they really deserve and should get so that they can get proper answers to their questions and not just quick ones, then they need to go on a support plan, right? And then they can ask questions 24/7, 365, and I can always guarantee people a response within 1 business day. I've never had a problem being able to deliver on a promise like that. And I've learned to make it clear what 1 business day means. It means if you ask me a question on a Friday, I may not get back to you till Monday, but I will get back to you by Monday. Okay, so that's the rule. After 3 responses, we suggest that they come on and sign up for a support plan, right? And that's how we get from minutes being where we place our value to membership. In other words, they're not paying for the amount of minutes of yours that they get. They're paying for access, right? They're paying for access to your expertise, you know, to your years of expertise and years of blood, sweat, and tears figuring this stuff out yourself, or paying God knows how much money to learn it, right? So that's what your customers are now going to pay you for from today forward, right? Is access to you and the knowledge and information and expertise that you can bring. Next, with the right platform, you can use Loom videos and screenshots, and it's really easy to get people's questions answered and provide them with a ton of context, right? And the idea is that this is asynchronous, meaning you don't both have to be there at the same time. You know, they can ask the question, you come back and post your answer. And, you know, I was years ago recommending doing this in Slack. I don't love Slack, especially for this kind of thing, because in terms of messaging, if I want to, let's say, paste some screenshots in a response, Slack is going to group all the screenshots at the bottom so that there's no way to sort of put a screenshot in there and then comment in line with an explanation about what that screenshot is trying to say. So I don't love Slack for this kind of a service. It at one time was what I felt was the best, because there was just nothing else out there better. But I'm going to talk to you today about what I've switched to and what I can't imagine I will ever switch away from in the future. All right, and then the other thing that's important before I go on is, of course, the question you're probably already asking, what if they want a live session, right? And the answer, if they want a live session, is that that's extra, right? In other words, the basic support includes unlimited Q&A. If they want a live session, that's fine. And there's 2 ways to go about this that I'll mention, right? So the first way that I'll mention, and probably my preferred way, is to say, you know, a one-on-one session is not included. If you want a Zoom session, I can jump on with you for an hour and it's $250, something like that. Obviously, you adjust that price according to what feels comfortable for you. Okay, and then of course, you know, these days it's very easy, whatever you're using to post the recording, so they have that as an added value, so they can review it and pause it and, you know, get the most out of that training that you've given them, right? So now you have a way to deal with those serial question answers, and you also have the perfect way to bring on sort of the lower tier members into a simple support plan / subscription model. Now for the support plan itself, I think $500 a month is a very fair price, right? $500 a month, unlimited Q&A in a rich text environment, which you can already see on my screen that I've got here. We're going to do this in Circle, and bear with me for another couple minutes, and then I'm going to dive in and show you exactly how to set this up in Circle, how to use Circle on the front and back end to get these things set up. Right. The other option, by the way, is, let's say for $500 a month, you can say I'll include a single 1-hour session via Zoom each month. Use it or lose it. We don't want people accumulating like 10 hours of sessions over a year and then trying to use them all at once, right? So use it or lose it. You get 1 hour included for $500 a month plus the unlimited Q&A, right? So people should be delighted with something like that. Okay, and the bottom line is your member will have access to a reliable resource that they can trust 100%. Because I'm sure they've tried, if they're coming to you and asking you for help, they've probably tried a lot of other resources and maybe found the answers not really adequate or not really deep enough, right? Nobody's going to take that much time out for somebody who's not a paying customer, right? We're all busy. So, and then the other thing is they probably also found at some point that they've gotten downright crappy advice from people who, just either couldn't be bothered or really didn't have the experience to know the answer and, weren't humble enough to be able to admit, hey, you know what, I don't have experience with that, right? So bottom line, you can provide a really powerful, valuable resource for people where this way they know they have one place to go that they can trust absolutely to get the best possible answers, and for that matter, that you'll be honest with them and say, hey, you know what, I don't have experience with that, but A, either here's somebody who does, or B, let me go research that for you and I'll get back to you with a proper answer, right? And I've never had anybody complain to me about telling them honestly that I needed to go research something. If anything, people appreciate that, right? And here's the philosophy behind this whole model and why I think it works so well for support. Is it's priced for capacity, not exhaustion, right? Even in a model like this, let's say this was going to be your whole business model. You don't need 50 clients paying you hourly, right? If you even have 10 clients paying you $500 a month, that's $5K per month. That's $60K a year. That's more than a lot of bookkeepers I know are making at this point, right? And it's probably going to be pretty easy to sign people up for something like this, especially once you've answered a few questions for free and done it very thoroughly, and gone deep with it to show them, what's possible. Then I think they're going to have no problem seeing the value in paying $500 a month, knowing that a resource like this is available to them, and also, frankly, knowing that if they find they don't need it, they can cancel. It's month to month. You're not locking them into anything long term. Okay, the bottom line here is the subscription model rewards curiosity, not chaos, right? It rewards people for asking questions and wanting to learn more, and it lets you stay focused and create better resources and support your members without burning out, right? And then, like I said, when somebody really needs one-on-one, you can show up at your best because you feel like you're getting paid really well for it. You don't feel like you're getting taken advantage of, and neither do they. Everybody's happy with this kind of model in place. Now, why do I say the smartest people are doing it, right? Part of that is, quite honestly and transparently, because I want to get your attention on this, right? But the other part, the reason I believe it's actually true, is that when I look at and talk to a lot of accountants and bookkeepers out there and they tell me what they're struggling with, it all kind of points back to this. You can't scale because if you're up to your eyeballs in work, it's because you're not charging enough money, right? And so you're charging too little. You have too much work to do because you have too many customers, right? And there's no way you could scale by taking on more work, especially if, as it is, you can't keep up with the work you have. So we want to charge a lot more, lose a few customers, getting paid more money and having fewer clients and less work to do is exactly what we need by way of a solution. So we're not selling hours. We're not selling, I don't care how many transactions you're processing, right? We're selling outcomes. We're selling transformation. And you're charging for the power of your attention. And that, my friend, is how you go from being a trainer to being a true trusted partner with your customers. All right, so now let's talk about how to get this thing set up. What I've got here, my friends at Circle were kind enough to give me access to a free account for a limited time. So as of this recording, I've got a couple months left to get in all the trainings that I'm going to do. Maybe they'll let me extend it. But anyway, so it's bare bones, right? And this is by design. I want you to see what Circle looks like when you first sign up and get in. Now, I did set things up because I did that obviously as I was writing up the article for this. And by the way, speaking of that, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link in the description that will take you over to join my community. And in my community, you have this video, of course, but you also have a detailed write-up with screenshots. Case in point, I love the environment because I can put rich text content inside of a thing. So if you like to read, if you prefer to have something like that with screenshots, almost textbook-like to refer back to if you're trying to follow along and get this set up for yourself, then I strongly encourage you to join my community. It's absolutely free to access this stuff, but you do need to be a member. Now, so let me show you how this works. So once you get started with a Circle account, and I'm not going to bore you with the process of actually signing up, I'm sure you can figure that out. And they have great onboarding, by the way, great customer support. It's going to be bare bones. You won't even see this part. So we're here where it says private support. That's called a space group. And here Athena Solutions is my sample customer, and that's called a space, right? So that gives you the answer to a question you're likely asking. A lot of people used to ask me this about Slack: do I have a separate workspace for each customer? And the answer is yes, absolutely, because the whole idea is to have a sort of rich environment where they can ask all kinds of questions. And if you're having a single channel system for each one, it doesn't work. It defeats the purpose. You might as well just use WhatsApp. All right. So here we're going to use a single space for each member because there's a lot of context we can provide within a space. We can use topics, and there's just lots of ways we can go with this. So you have this space group called private support. Nobody sees this but you. It's on the back end. Or I'm sorry, no, this will show up on the front end, but the only thing anybody's ever going to see here is the group that they are assigned to, which is obviously going to be done by you and only to the space that's for them. So, and I'm going to walk you through the specific settings so you understand how to make sure that this is locked down and nobody else can see each other's stuff, right? So we have the space group and we have the space. Now, the way to create a space group, initially you would only have this. When I click the plus sign, even though it seems like it would be the place to create a space, you will also have this option of creating a space group. The settings for a space group are super simple. You're just going to name it, and then you can choose the custom URL if you don't like what it creates based on the name you give. And then over here, pretty straightforward permissions. You're pretty much going to leave all this off, right? You could turn on this option, hide from non-space members, because that's one of the things we want to make sure is we don't want anybody to see this unless they're actually a member of the space, okay? You don't need this on, although you can. That's totally up to you. And these question marks, of course, will explain this all, right? And then we definitely don't want to allow members to create spaces, so we're going to leave that off, right? And so that's all you'll do. To create this, let's confirm how I set this one up. If I go to Edit Space Group, you can see I turned on Hide Member Count. Nobody needs to see that. Hide from non-space members, absolutely. And sure enough, only show Join Spaces in the sidebar. In other words, people can only see the spaces that they're in. They can't see any other spaces, okay? And that's for the space group. So that will apply to any spaces I add to this space group, right? And as you can see, the rest of it's very simple. I've got private support, and I was happy with the slug it created. No need to change that, okay? You can see I've got one member here in the form of myself, right? And so again, very simple, very straightforward how to set up your space group. Now let's look at the space. So in here, I clicked plus and I clicked create a space. Okay, and then I created this space, and I'm going to go straight into the editing part of it. So you can I'm going to walk you through the options. Again, it's all pretty straightforward, but my experience is that it helps you all to see me walk through something like this. Okay, so as you can see, you can choose an emoji, right? So I found something that I felt like looked like Athena. Okay. And then, of course, it's just confirming this is part of the space group private support. But as you can guess, if I needed to, I could click this drop down and change it to something else if I wanted to move it around. So flexibility there. We don't want to hide the space from the sidebar because we do want it to be visible to members. And as you can see from the help tip, members can still access it from other parts of the community, but it will hide it even from members. So we don't want that. We've already configured the setting that makes sure that only people who are added to the space can see it, and that was at the space group level. And then here at the space level, the access is going to be secret, which means the only way anybody gets access to this is I add them, right? Or you as the admin adds them. And I'll get to the workflow in terms of when people sign up and explain a few really important things about that when you get there, okay? There's different layouts. I like for a support type form like this, where it's going to be very Q&A intensive, I like the list layout. Okay, but you can do cards. I definitely wouldn't do feed. Ultimately, this is your choice. You can switch it, you can change it, so play with it and see what you like best. But if you're asking for my recommendation, I say go with list. We don't need the right sidebar. in here for something like this. And here's where you can set up for a given space up to 20 topics. Each space can get its own set of 20 topics. So this is perfect if you're an accountant or bookkeeper working with customers in a training environment like this. You might have topics like banking, accounts receivable. A lot of times I've said it's useful to have the sort of topics follow the structure of your balance sheet, because that's often the best way to sort of drive how you train and how you organize information around how to do the bookkeeping. Is it's largely driven off the balance sheet. And then of course you can add in the major areas of a profit and loss statement, such as income, cost of goods sold, and expenses, and so on, right? Ultimately, that's 100% up to you, but you are limited to 20 topics per space, so choose wisely. That should be more than enough. And then this part is really just in terms of design. You can choose a cover image for the space and then a mobile thumbnail, okay? Once you're finished with the settings on the Customize tab here, you'll click Save Changes. And that's important because I learned the hard way, and this could have changed by now. So if you find that I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. But at one point I learned the hard way that if I click away, I lose my changes, right? So next over here to Paywalls, okay? You'll notice I do not have this linked to a paywall. And the reason why, this gets into what I said I'll go into, and I will in a little bit more detail, but since we're here, I'll quickly mention, you do not want to link the paywall that somebody's going to use to sign up to a particular space, because then everybody who signs up for your support plan is going to get added to that space. So I'm going to talk to you about how to address that. There's two ways to approach it. Okay, the mobile lock screen, I don't know why they call it this, but here it's not going to matter anyway. But just so you understand what this is if you had the space visible to all members of the community. Over here you can create essentially like a landing page that includes the paywall, where if somebody clicks, it will just bring this up where it's going to say, hey, this is a private space. If you want access, click here to join. Again, in this particular model, one-on-one training, it's not going to be relevant. You would never do that. We've already confirmed you're hiding the space from view from anyone who's not already a member. So we're going to skip that for now. Okay, members, of course, is going to show you who's a member of this space. Okay, and then here we have some options. These are important to go through and understand, and again, they're all straightforward. I would certainly want people to be notified by email, especially when they're new. They can go in later and change their own settings if for some reason they find the email notifications annoying. But what we're setting here is what is going to be the preferences by default for anybody that gets added to the space, right? And again, they can override this in their own settings. But in the beginning, especially if somebody's new to this and not really used to it, I definitely want them getting emails, right? Because also, here's what's going to happen, guaranteed, is you're going to sign somebody up. You'll go to all the trouble of explaining how this works, probably even touring them through, which is a smart idea, so they understand exactly how this works and why it's so beautiful as far as a solution for offering them a training resource. And then they're going to, right off the bat, going to email you a question. And so you're going to have to train people a little bit in the beginning when they do stuff like that by making a point of not answering their question in that email. So you train them, hey, the whole idea of the circle space is that we should have these dialogues there, right? And sometimes what I even encourage, and a colleague of mine shared this idea with me a few years back, and I loved it, where once they're all set up and they've been added into the space, and you can confirm that, you send them an email where the subject line is, this is the last email you will ever receive from me. And basically it goes on to explain that the reason for that is Circle is now the place for all communications, right? And they can DM you, right? If you're not familiar with Circle, and you can assure them, they can DM you. So if they have a few members of their team and they want to bring up something private with you, then invite them to use DMs for anything like that. That's totally fine, okay? For the most part, you're going to want the default permissions, right? Obviously, I don't want to allow members to add others. You could do that, potentially, right? In other words, if you invite the owner of the company, and you could turn this on, it's only relevant for this space, and it would allow them to add like other team members. So this is something you could turn on, but it's going to be off by default, and in many cases, you'll probably want to leave it that way. You definitely want to allow them to create posts. That's the whole point. They got to ask questions, right? That's how they do it. I wish you could actually require a post title, because that really helps. And certainly allow cover images. In the layout that I'm suggesting with the list view, you don't really see the covers in the previews, but it doesn't hurt, right? It doesn't cost anything to allow cover images, right? we can turn this on for sure because it shouldn't matter anyway, but just in case, this means that if you have an area of spaces that's like free to the public, right, which you're going to do at some point, you're going to just invite people into your community so that you can provide them with free resources, and then as the opportunities arise within your own community, you know, this becomes kind of the bottom of your funnel. Then you can start suggesting to people, hey, it's been 3 questions, let's get on a support plan kind of thing, right? This I don't think matters either way. I would almost want it on so that it's clear for everybody who's in this space that we have, like, let's say 5 members. So if somebody's like, hey, you know, I only invited 3 people, what's going on? We can, you know, that can alert our attention to something like that. That's important. I'd certainly allow members to sort post. By default for posts, I would definitely want the latest or newest first, right? And then the default comment, this is all sorting, right? So what do I want to see first? Maybe the oldest comment first. So it's just in sort of straight chronological order. You know, if you prefer, you can do latest. That way, the most recent comment is on top. I find that when you do that, you sort of lose the context, though, because it's all kind of backwards, right? The rest of this is irrelevant because I don't care about SEO in a space that is meant to be completely private. So I saved my changes to be sure I didn't lose them, and that, as you can see, takes you out. So we're going to go back into the back end settings, right? And that finishes up options. And then over here we have workflows. For now, I'm going to say don't worry about workflows. They're automations. Think Zapier, right? Or if this, then that kind of thing, where within Circle you can create automations that basically say, hey, when this thing happens, you know, do these 3 things or whatever, right? There's going to be use cases for that in the onboarding process when somebody signs up potentially, but not while you're kind of in the ongoing support plan. Okay, so that's all your settings for setting up that private space, and now you've seen exactly how to ensure it's completely locked down, so nobody's getting in here unless I've invited them in, and I'm not going to do that until they've signed up and paid. Okay, so we lock it down at the space group level, and then we also lock it down at the space level. Okay, I'll come back to what this looks like, because I feel like it's sort of more relevant to explain to you, you know, the sort of process of signing somebody up and how to get their payment and what to do then, right? The sort of workflow, okay? So we're going to click on the title of the community. I've just called this the accounting space. Very original, I know. This for you, it'll be the name of your firm. It'll be something community, right? So if I go here, and I can click any one of these and I'll have access to the whole menu, but obviously where we want to focus right now is here on Paywalls. Okay, now the first thing you'll do, which is already done here with mine, is you need to connect your community with a Stripe account. That's all Circle lets you use, is Stripe, and it's not a bad thing. Stripe is amazing. If you've ever used Stripe and played around with Stripe on its back end, it's very easy to search, very intuitive. I actually love their platform. So you have to connect it with a Stripe account. If you don't have one, it's very easy to create. It takes a few minutes to get that all set up. Once that's set up, we can create a paywall, right? So when I click here, it's a similar kind of process to what you just saw as far as setting up the space with the tabs across the top, right? And then the most obvious straightforward stuff is the display name, right? You can choose an internal name. You can do a subtitle if you want. You can set the currency, okay? And then, of course, you can... the first part of the checkout URL you don't have any control over, but you can set what the tail of it is, right? And so you can, like, I can call this support or something like that, okay? You can put in a description that will show up in checkout. That may be useful, okay? And then if you're going to do coupon codes, you can have an auto-apply coupon, which I would probably err on the side of leaving this turned off, because what it means is if you have a coupon that is linked to this paywall, it will automatically apply it. So that means anybody who signs up gets the coupon code discount. So unless you're certain that's exactly what you want, don't do it. So instead of creating a new paywall, let me just jump into the one that I've created, and I'll just walk through all the settings with you, right? So I named it Private Support Membership, right? And I like using the word private in there. It provides reassurance, and I think it gives it an air of exclusivity, which it is, so it should, right? Internal name support, that's fine. And as you can see, I'm consistent, if nothing else, right? So I put support as the tail of the URL, and here's a brief description. Get access to unlimited Q&A, 24/7, 365, 1 business day turnaround guarantee. Okay, and here's where we set pricing. Actually, yes. So I set it up monthly. So the way to do that is you add a price, and then you have choices: one-time fee or subscription or installments, right? So over here, I obviously chose subscription, and I set it as 500. Once you create it, you can't edit it. You can add new pricing to the same paywall, right? But I can, and by the way, the reason that's useful is you could give people an annual option, right? I could say, you know, let's do a one-time fee. Annually at 500 a month would be 6,000, right? And let's say I'd want to just maybe knock off 2 months in exchange for them signing up for a year, right? So it'd be 5,000 for a year, something like that. So you could do that. Over here, you don't, for this kind of a model, for a training model like we're talking about, you don't want any of these. You certainly wouldn't want a trial period. The first 3 questions was their trial period, right? I would leave this on, allow members to self-cancel. I don't think it's on by default. I think I said as I was doing the write-up, you want to turn this on. It just shows confidence in your offering. The worst thing you can do, you know, something that really pisses me off when I'm signed up for a subscription with anyone, is where it's clearly intentionally difficult for me to figure out where to go to cancel my subscription. It should be the easiest thing, and the absolute worst that people do is when you have to call them to cancel because clearly they want to try and sell you on staying. I don't want to be sold on staying. I need to cancel. I have my reasons. Trust that, right? So it shows a ton of confidence when you just make it as easy as possible for people to cancel. And I can promise you most people will ask you to cancel it for them anyway, even though you've made it possible for them to do. Most people, frankly, are kind of lazy that way. They're just gonna, that's usually what happens to me, is people email me and saying, hey, I need to cancel, you know, and I'll just do it for them. It's no big deal. So that's the pricing screen. Then we have access, okay? Now this is important. So you do have to assign an access group to the paywall, right? So I'm going to duplicate my tab here so we can look at access groups, right? So that's going to be found under audience, because access groups have to do with people, right? And so here's private support membership. I'm going to click into this, okay? I have a member, David, right? And so here's the thing. This is the access group, remember, that we're looking at here. And over here, we're looking at the paywall setup and what it has access to. So this is the private support membership access group. But you'll notice the access is nothing. So you have to set up an access group, but you do have the option of not having that access group actually provide access to anything, right? And so it's just the infrastructure you need. Now here's where there's one of 2 ways. As you can see, the way I've gone with the setup here, this is the route I've gone, is they're gonna sign up, and when they do, they're not gonna actually be given access to anything. You're gonna get a notification that they've signed up. You'll use those workflows to automatically send them an email welcoming them and letting them know that they'll be granted access to their private space in 24 hours, whatever it takes, right? Whatever you can reliably promise without ever, you know, like obviously under promise, over deliver, right? So this is how you set up the access group. And that way, when somebody signs up, they're going to theoretically get access to this access group, but all it really does is list them as a member of that access group, as you can see has happened with David. We've got the paywall. You have to link an access group to the paywall, but you can configure the access group to basically give them no access to anything. Okay, and that's the way you want it. The other option is that you could create a public sort of space for anybody who signs up for private support. And remember, that's important to understand. If you're going this route, what it means is the minute somebody signs up, they're going to be granted access to this commons kind of space, right? And you'll obviously want to make it clear, like, hey, this is not your private space. This is just like an online lobby where you can hang out. Feel free to network with the other people who are signed up. But then we'll notify you when your space is ready, kind of thing, right? So the reason I don't like that option, I mean, I do and I don't. I like it because at least it gives them something to see right away and eliminates any potential confusion, as in, hey, I just signed up. What the heck? You know, why don't I have access to anything? but it does potentially create that confusion. And I could see where somebody is going to get confused, not really be paying attention, and they're going to go in there and start asking questions and sharing sensitive details in the process, little realizing that they're sharing that with a whole bunch of other people who may have also signed up. So it's up to you. If you are going to go that route, then make sure that you make it very clear to people, like very prominent in big letters, like do not post your questions here, right? This is just for chatter. So you can do that, right? I don't suggest it. Like I said, we're going to use a workflow, send an email to the person when they've signed up, and and then just let them know, hey, sit tight, we've got you. We'll send you a notification as soon as your space is ready, okay? So that is the kind of workflow. And once they've signed up, there's a couple of things we can do. But the reality is there's no way to automate creating a space for them once they've signed up. So bottom line is you're going to have to create a process for yourself where you get notified the second somebody signs up, right? And then that is your cue to go set up their space. And by the way, a little pro tip here. Since everything is going to be basically the same, let's go here. There's two ways to look at a space. Right now we're looking at it on the front end, right? If I go back here to content, there's spaces. From back here, I can duplicate the space. That will copy all your settings over. It will not copy over the members. But that's a super fast way. If I know I've got Athena solution set up exactly the way I want for every other member and their own private space, then I'll duplicate the space and I'll just go in and change the icon. And so within seconds, pretty much, I can have their space set up, and then I can invite them in. If I want to add a new member to the space, which again, I'm going to make sure I've got the payment, I'm going to get that notification, then I come in here to Athena Solutions, I go to the Members tab, and here's Add Members. And if I want to add David, I can add him right here. I can choose whether or not I want to notify him. In your case and in this scenario, I would definitely want to check that off. I'm not going to in this case because David's my designer and I don't need him to get confused about why he's getting a notification like this. But I can just add him in. And so that's going to be your process. It says it may take a couple of minutes for changes, but typically if you just refresh the page, then you have to go back in. And no, I guess it's going to need a minute before it shows that he's there. But bottom line, that's how you add somebody in. That's the only way to add somebody into a space in an environment like this where everything's private and secret and locked down, right? Because like we went over earlier, we took time and went to lengths to make sure that nobody could see this space unless they were added in. All right, but that's how we add members, is right up here. So we go into the space, we go to the back end, we go to members, and we click Add Members. So now what happens? So how do we automate the process of letting them know that they have successfully joined? Because that's the thing. Since they have to wait for you to add them, you don't want them to be confused or get frustrated because they just paid you $500 and they're paying you monthly $500 and they're like, there's nothing, right? So here's what we do. We're going to go into the back end and we're going to go to Workflows. Okay, and then we're going to create our first workflow. Okay, and the basic gist of this is when somebody signs up for this paywall, we want to send them an email. Again, we're not going to give them anything that gives them access to a space because we have to go set the space up and invite them in manually, but we do want to send them an email that explains that. Okay, so I'm going to just say start from scratch. Okay, this is going to be an automation. Create workflow, okay, and then we want to add a trigger, okay, and basically the trigger is going to be based on a paywall, and now I'll explain to you which one we want to pick and why. Okay, so we don't want to choose charge for a paywall because what that's going to do is every month when they get charged, they're going to get this email, right? I made that mistake. So we want subscribe to. That means this is the first time they've just subscribed, and so this will be the only time they get the email. Okay, and then which paywall, private support membership, and continue. And then we add the next step. Okay, we want to send an email. Okay, and then the rest, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by teaching you how to write an email, right? The internal name is going to be, new support plan subscriber. Subject line, thank you so much for your purchase. Give us 24 hours, something that makes it clear right in the subject, because remember, a lot of people won't even click into the email and read it, right? So something short and succinct in the subject that says, we've got you, we've got your back, and you'll get a notification as soon as your space is set up and we can invite you to it. Okay, and then of course here you can click start writing and write up the email. There's templates and all kinds of other fun stuff, right? But that's basically how you're going to set up that workflow. And don't forget to come up here and just name this and call it like new support member email, something like that, right? Okay, and that is pretty much it. The only other thing I'll show you is once somebody's a subscriber, and let's say you get that email that you hopefully never get that says, hey, you know what, I need to cancel. I can't afford it. I'm not using it. Whatever the reason is, I don't really care. What I do care about is how to show you how to go ahead and honor their request. So let's say David said, hey, I need to cancel. I'm going to click on his name. Okay, and over here is billing. Okay, now he doesn't actually have any subscriptions because he's not actually signed up, but if this were a member of your support plan, you would see them right here under subscriptions, and it would just show the one subscription that they're on a monthly support plan for $500 a month. Under transactions, you'll see the list of each monthly payment that you've gotten, so you'll have the whole history here. This will show you whatever payment methods they have and use and their address if they've added it. Okay, so all you'll do is find the subscription here. There will be an ellipsis on the right that you'll click on and you'll cancel it. Right? It's really, really simple, easy to do. If over time, and what hopefully happens is you have, 100,000 members, then you'll click in here and search for them by name. The more reliable thing to search by is probably their email address. And the good news about that is if I click onto any member, their email is here. This screen is annoying because as you can see, it's cut off and I can't copy the whole email. Right, that option is not there. But if I go to the message screen, here I can get his whole entire email. And I know David won't mind me, but actually I will have to blur that out because David won't mind, but YouTube will if I share personal information. So anyway, that's how we manage subscriptions. Like I said, it's really simple. Final thought. This is not about abandoning one-on-one work. It's about putting it in the right container, right? When we stop selling minutes and start selling access to you and your expertise, it just changes the whole mindset and reframes the value that you offer. And I guarantee you're going to end up getting paid a lot more money doing things this way. You may have fewer customers, and that's a good thing, right? You'd trust me, you're better off having fewer customers paying you a bunch more money, because that goes back to something I said earlier. And what it means when I say you're priced for capacity, meaning you'll have plenty of time, all the time in the world. When these people come in and start asking you questions, it's never going to feel like a disruption. You're going to be like, I can't wait to get in there and help these people because it's going to be a pleasure working with them because they're paying you good money in exchange for your expertise, not your time, but your expertise. And they won't care if it took you 10 minutes or 30 minutes to answer their question. What they will care about, and this is where the value is they got an answer that's accurate, reliable, well thought out, and well researched if needed. Bottom line, they can rely on it and then go do their thing in their own QuickBooks files or whatever it is you've helped them with. And that's really what it all comes down to, right? And so again, you don't need more hours to take on more clients, I promise you that. What we need is a better system for delivering what you know, for sharing that knowledge with people. Always go out there and offer help to people for fun and for free. But like I said in the beginning, at a certain point, when the same person keeps asking you questions, it's perfectly appropriate to suggest that you can do a much better service by them by having them sign up for your support plan so that you can pay them the attention they deserve.